Hi there, gang. It's Blake again. Back to talk about some of my problems with cirrhosis and alcohol. And today I just kind of wanted to jump right in from kind of where I left off yesterday, just to get to the point and get this out of the way. Um, so that's what we're gonna do. I also wanted to mention that I got emails today from two of my favorite charities or nonprofits about it being World Mental Health Day. And I know every day seems like it's national or world something day, but it's a good thing just to keep in mind your mental health. I'm going to put a link below to both of these places in case y'all want to check it out. They're good to just take a look at, read the blogs. If you're ever feeling down, there's things on lots of different subjects, so you can find something that's pretty interesting for you. But I'll leave information about that in the description. So I wanted to finish up with what I was talking about yesterday. So I ended up in Baylor Hospital in downtown Dallas. To figure out what was going on with my eyes turning yellow and putting on all this weight in my abdomen and whatnot. So they send me down there by ambulance. It was kind of in the middle of the night. I think it was 10 to like 11 or 12 or so. But I got down there pretty late. My mom eventually came up and met me down there, and she stayed with me while I was there for I think I was there for maybe 3 days or so. But so I get down there, and immediately as they're moving me out, like the EMT guy was like, "Whoa, your eyes are are wild. I've never seen anything like that." I was like, "Thank you, I appreciate it." I'm like, "Yeah, that's kind of why I'm here." But anyway, so we go down there. They pretty much immediately send me up to a room and just kind of draw some blood and do some tests from there. Cause I mean, they weren't wasting any time. At this point, I still didn't have insurance, so the fact that they even had me there that quickly was a good thing. But it also was an indication that this was some pretty serious stuff that I was into. And once those results came back, I also wanted to say, the doctors that I have now, I love. Like, I've gotten really close to them. They know who I am. I know who they are. And we just have a really good relationship. But whenever I first went, like, admittedly, it was kind of tough because I'm used to, like, I go out of my way in the world, the outside world, to try to be nice to people and kind to people and come across respectful and things like that in general. And usually that's kind of what I get back. But whenever I went to the hospital there, like, it was a little bit different, and I could feel it. But I mean, I couldn't really judge anyone for it. But I could see, like, in their eyes, they're like, okay, well, here's another alcoholic. So we can just give him the rundown of what we think is going to happen. And then, they don't have too high expectations, because at that point, it's up to you. So what they told me was, it turns out you have like pretty late stage cirrhosis because you've been drinking way too much. And if you don't stop, like, now, then pretty much you've got about 2 years left at the point that you're at right now. You've got about 2 years if you can't get it together and start doing things to make yourself better. So it was pretty intense. I mean, I was like, okay, do you have to be so blunt? And I mean, it turns out that was the best way that they could have done it. And I get it, because again, it's just, to them, it's another alcoholic who's coming to see them because he had a problem, and now we have to put it in his hands and expect or not that he's going to stop drinking for his own good. And then we can do something, or he's going to go the other way and it's going to be out of our control. So they just gave it to me straight. Um, this was the issue. At this time, I was like super bloated. It turns out this condition is called ascites. It's when your liver is so bad, so scarred, which is what cirrhosis is. It's when your liver gets scarred to the point that it can't heal itself anymore. Um, but when your liver can't do that, all these fluids that your body naturally is flushing out, they can. Let me also make a point that some of this is going to be a little graphic. I'm not going to go out of my way to make this disgusting, but I'm going to try to be real with it. So they said whenever, like, your liver can't process these things out, then your abdomen starts to fill up with this fluid that should be expelled from your body. So that's what all of that is. And around a little before this, I had started noticing hernias. Like, I had inguinal hernias, which are the ones in your groin, on both sides, one before the other. But I mean, the fluid had gone to where it was leaking into like my groin area, and that was blowing up. Not blowing up, but I mean, it was noticeable. And then that also led to an umbilical hernia, which is the one that a lot of babies have and things like that, around your belly button, where all of this fluid obviously is pushing on my abdominal walls. So that wasn't able to contain everything that well. So then I get that hernia, and there's really nothing they can do, obviously, about hernias, which is a pretty simple surgery in and of itself. But if you have fluid that's gathering at a constant rate, obviously you can't just go into someone and fix this hernia and expect it to be okay, because most likely it's going to get infected, or it's not going to hold, but it can lead to huge complications down the road. So the hernias are something that I have had to deal with the whole time. I still have them now, but they're a little more manageable, a little more under control. But anyway, so they told me all of this, that this is the problem. That's why you're gaining all this weight. So what we're going to do is send you home with some medication, and send you home with some diuretics, which help you basically urinate a lot of the stuff out. It pulls kind of things into that area, and then you can just kind of, get rid of it that way. But these two that they gave me, you have to go to a doctor because they have to be prescribed to you because they're that strong. And I had tried before, because I knew that it was a fluid buildup like that. I tried just buying things, but any of that stuff that you can buy over the counter is not going to be strong enough. It's not what you need. Ascites in itself doesn't go away. If you're to the stage where your cirrhosis is scarred that much, then you can help to control it, but it doesn't go away on its own. And that's where the liver transplant is the only way that you're going to stop that fluid from building up. So what they did also was, they're like, we want to schedule you while you're here for this thing called a paracentesis. And that's where we put it, which I had read about. Like, I read that it could come to that, and the thought of it horrified me. But they're like, this is when we'll take like a small little needle, we'll numb a little section of your abdomen over here, and then push this needle in that has like a little catheter on the end, and we'll drain that fluid out. So I was, of course, so anxious and nervous to have this done. But I was just like, this is what I've gotten myself into. So, I mean, the ultimate goal for them is to help, and this is what they have to do. So I just need to let it happen. So the ladies who did it were super nice. They tried to make it as comfortable for me as possible, and honestly, it wasn't that bad. As they were putting in the lidocaine, the numbing injection, that part hurt a little. Like I could feel it go in a little and then a little bit more and a little bit more. But every time it did, there was just numbing right behind it. So eventually I couldn't feel that. And so then they pulled that out and they inserted the little tube, which was tiny. You can't feel that going in at all, but the part that you could feel was like the insides. And I don't really know how to explain it except maybe like a little pressure. But you could kind of tell that there's something inside your stomach that whenever you move, like it kind of will, you don't want to move too much because it'll kind of poke into your organs and you can feel that in a weird way. But so they just drained all of that out. It ended up a total of like 8, and I think they're liters, but I'm not totally sure. But they're just like these jugs that it drains into. And I've learned since that each one of those is about 3 pounds of fluid. So they ended up pulling like 8 of these jugs out of my abdomen, which was like, I mean, as she lined them up, it was shocking to see how many there were and how much fluid had actually gained in there, which, I mean, to like, it had made my abdomen swell like under my ribs. So like my right directly under my ribs was starting to come out. Like it was uncomfortable. So they did that and they cleaned it up and then just put a bandage on me and said, you know, like 3 days you could take it off. So that was that, and then they sent me home with meds. I think I had to stay overnight. Then I forget how long I was there, but it doesn't really matter. This was basically it. So I left with the diagnosis that I had late-stage cirrhosis. I was going to eventually probably have to have a liver transplant. I had to stop drinking, or I was basically gonna die within a couple of years, or just depending on how long my body could handle it. And with knowing that this was something that was going to keep happening. It's since I've gotten it under control a lot better, but that just came with time and following directions. So I went home, and for the first couple of weeks I was like, okay, I mean, I was scared into like, okay, I'm not gonna touch, I've got to stop. So I was going to AA meetings and things like that, but slowly it crept back in where I just couldn't quite, I was like, I don't know how I'm gonna do this. Like, one, I was living right next to a liquor store, which was temptation from the start, but I was like, okay, I mean, I have to, but then slowly it crept back in, and before I knew it, I was drinking again, and maybe not quite to the extreme, but pretty much, and I wasn't handling it well. Like, my brain was not doing well. Before this all, well, I don't want to get into that, but I had gone into like mental health rehab and things like that, but that was in between all this, and I really just want to focus on the medical things, so I'm gonna leave some of that out for right now. So fast forward, I was able to quit. Diagnosis was in September or August, and then I kept drinking until March of, I guess it was 2019. It was the next year. And then something just clicked, and I was like, you know what, I don't want to die like this. Like, I can't do it. And I'll talk about kind of, if anyone's interested in how I was able to do that, but I haven't had a drink since. So it's in March, this coming March, it'll be 3 years that I haven't had anything to drink at all. So things have only been able to turn around because of that, but they did get worse for a while. This ascites sometimes was okay, sometimes it was just out of control. There was one time I was at home, and like, I mean, it was so swollen all the time, and that I would put a bandage over just the belly button part, because I could tell that there was like a little bit of leakage coming out sometimes, like while I slept or whatever. So I tried not to. I would take a shower and wear like waterproof bandages over it so that it couldn't get wet and be able to soften and then open, because that was my biggest nightmare. And then one day that happened. I was getting ready to go visit my family up in North Texas, um, and like I just suddenly, my shirt was wet, and I was like, "What is that?" So like I looked down, and this area, like where my belly button was, which was the weakest part of my abdomen, had a little hole in it, or it had opened up enough that this fluid was just coming out on its own. And I was like, okay, I don't know what to do. So I grabbed like the biggest containers that I had, and I just put it in the sink, and I stood over the sink and just let it come out like little, like, I mean, you could put pressure on it and it would like squirt, or you could just let it go and it would just drip. But I mean, it was coming out, and there was nothing I could do. I didn't have time to go to the doctor because it was just coming out. There was going to be wet everywhere if I tried to do that. So I was like, okay, I just keep this area clean, let it do what it's got to do, and then I'll figure it out. So it took a while, because I mean, all I was doing, it didn't hurt or anything. I didn't feel it at all. It was just coming out, which is how I didn't even notice it until I happened to either look down or touch my shirt or something and it was wet. But it was awful. I mean, you don't want to go through that. But I mean, once it stopped, I cleaned it up, put a bandage on it, and it was like I had just had another paracentesis. So, I mean, it was crazy, like the level of comfort that I was getting, because I'd been through so many of these things. But I don't recommend, obviously, doing that on your own. Um, Around the same time, I started having these really bad headaches, like every month, right around the same time. Like the first time it happened, there was this huge, like my head was just like pressure, and then like it was just building up, and then it would just keep on until like I'm so uncomfortable, like just right in here, it was just like building up, and then once it stopped, immediately I would have the worst headache. And this happened like 3 or 4 months in a row, like right around the same time, to the point where as soon as I would feel that pressure, I would know that that's what was about to happen. Um, so one day it just hurt so bad that I had to go again to the emergency room. I'm like, I'm having just the worst headaches. And the timeline, I'm just not going to worry about right now, because it's all just jumbled up in my head. I was like, I'm having the worst headache like that I've ever had, and it's kind of been every month. So they took me in. At this point, I still don't have insurance, so but they're willing to do a CAT scan, and they're like, okay, the doctor wants to, we're gonna give you this sedative, and then the doctor wants to give you an MRI, which is send you through that little tube, which luckily they gave me the sedative, because I had no idea that I was going to be so terrified of the MRI machine. But that's an ongoing thing. Before I do that now, I have to, I'm like, I'm super claustrophobic, and I can't do this without some sort of sedation, like just a light enough. But I also have really high anxiety and stuff anyway. But so they did that, and it turns out that they find out that I have what's called they called it an AVM. It's an arteriovenous malformation, which is this, when the arteries, it can happen in several places. I think mine was in my head though, where arteries and veins just kind of jumble up together, and it makes it hard for them to do the job that they're supposed to do, because they're so like tangled. And mine is like right in here, which perfectly explains what that is. Like all this pressure that I'm getting every time is like right in here and right around the back of my neck. Everything just tenses up. And then this headache that I have is here. Um, so they're like, okay, this is what you have. Like, the doctor explained it to me on a rudimentary level. We didn't really get all the way into it, but he's like, okay, because basically they're like, he's uninsured. We could tell him what's going on. We can give him prescriptions, but then he's got to go. Like, we can't spend the resources or the money on someone who doesn't have insurance right now. So they give me this medication and say this is what's going on. It turns out that this medication that they gave me was not good for my liver, was like super bad for my liver, which was leading to more problems at the same time. And eventually, I'm gonna cut this short after I finish this part. Eventually, like I had moved in with my sister and my brother-in-law and my two nieces at this point, just to kind of keep an eye, like help me look out for myself, because I mean at this point it was getting scary. I was like, I don't know, if something could happen anytime, and if it's just me, I may not make it out of there. So as I was taking these medications one night, like I remember just like laying in bed and I got this horrible, like it was really, really bad again. And so I ended up having to go. I called my mom. It was like 3 or 4 in the morning, but I was like, it's so bad that I mean, I have to go. I think it was that time, or it may have been sometime early the next morning. I don't know. But so I went again, and then everything from here gets kind of blurry. It was hurting so bad. I really, honestly, I don't remember, but they ended up putting me, like, I had to get this procedure done where they put coils in my head to stop that. And I don't know, at some point I was having bleeding in 2 separate parts of my brain, because like I think these medications had a lot to do with it, but my liver, because it couldn't process everything out, was just wreaking havoc on all of this. This is basically what was happening. So at some point I ended up having 3 hemorrhages in my brain. So that's considered a form of stroke. So basically I had 3 strokes right after consecutively. And then everyone was like, as I was completely out of it, everyone was like, I mean, he's just had all of this, so we have no idea what's going to happen. Like, whenever he comes to, like if and when that is, we don't know if there's going to be extensive brain damage, like if you'll notice it, like if he won't be able to move the same, or we just don't know. Because I mean, I've just suffered 3 strokes. Like, one is enough usually to put somebody out in a certain, like in some way. 2 is a lot, but I've just had 3. And so it took a little while. I was in the hospital, kind of, things really get blurry for me because my head was playing all these mind games, and like when I was in and out of the hospital, I can't really remember. But at some point I did get to go home for like a day or 2, and then I don't remember anything. And my sister had told me that she was going in, to the bathroom one day, and my room is just across the hall from, or in the hall on the other side of the hall from the bathroom that she was going in, and there was like blood everywhere. And she was like, I could tell immediately from the type of blood that it was, because it was dark and like blood before it comes out of the body. She's like, I could tell that this was like a GI bleed, like a gastroenterological bleed. intestinal, I guess that's what it is, gastrointestinal. So she came in my room and like looked in there. My door was open, and I was just completely out. She said that like she was able to wake me up, but I wasn't really making any sense. I don't remember any of this. I'd been home for just a couple of days, and don't remember any of that. So she called an ambulance and explained to them what was going on. So they put me in this ambulance, take me to the doctor. They look at me there. I guess at some point I ended up getting a care flight to Dallas to a different hospital. I don't remember any of this. It's why it's hard for me to piece together exactly, even though I've heard it 1,000 times, to piece together exactly the timeline of it all and what the reasoning was behind all of it. But basically, yeah, I was on the verge of, like, they weren't sure that I was gonna make it through this, because now I was bleeding internally and it was coming out. I guess I don't know if I threw it up or if it came out the other side. I have no idea. But it was a world of issues that was going on. So I'm going to stop right here, and just leave on that note, before I get into kind of explaining the things that happened after that. But this was definitely in the middle of some of the worst of actually, I mean, obviously the worst that happened. So I'll pick up in the next video. Hopefully, I mean, this one's just as long, but hopefully it was a little easier to pay attention to. After these first few, I'm gonna work on editing, so I can hopefully tweak it. But anyway, that's just stuff that I'll have to worry about myself. So again, World Mental Health Day. Keep your mental health in mind all the time, because it's a super important thing, and don't let people tell you that it's just this new generation and they're so concerned about it. It's important. Life is not easy right now. It doesn't really get any easier, so we've got to learn how to figure out how to make it work for ourselves. So I'm gonna put these links in the description, and you guys check them out if you want to. Take care of yourself, and I will talk to you next time. Thanks.